Good evening, and welcome to all listeners and viewers throughout the United States and Alaska. You are watching an episode of Danakanaga's Our People Speak series with the Morris Thompson Cultural and Visitor Center, Tanana Chiefs Conference, and Danakanaga. I'm Sharon Hildebrand. Tonight's presentation, Tugging at Our Roots, Alaska Native Medicinal Plants. Thanks to our major sponsor, Doi Unlimited, and during the evening, you can find more shows on the Morris Thompson website. And if you feel compelled to support more showings such as these, you can type and support these programmings by clicking on the link on the site. Again, I'm Sharon Hildebrand of Nulato, where I was raised by my grandmother, Ellen Peters. I am the Village Outreach Liaison for Doi Unlimited. We have a great show for you this evening. It's with esteemed culture bearer, Kathleen Meckel. She will share various topics, including harvesting, preparing, and preserving Alaska Native medicinal plants, as well as associated wisdoms. Kathleen is Koikon Athabaskan from the village of Nulato, Alaska, and is an assistant professor at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Good evening, Kathleen.
Good evening.
Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and who you are? Tell the viewers a little bit more about yourself.
Okay, cool. I'm Kathleen Hildebrand Meckel. I grew up in the village of Nulato. I'm the eldest of 7 siblings, and I'm the daughter of Edith Nicholas and the late Barney Hildebrand. It's been a fun family to grow up in. Our grandparents were all involved, aunts and uncles. The whole village of Nulato was involved in raising us. So when people say it takes a community, they're telling the truth.
Awesome.
And then I left Nulato to go away to college. My mom, along with my high school teacher, said that would be the best option. So I ended up going so far away to Oakland, California.
Wow.
Yep. And then upon graduating, I would go home every summer, of course, to cut fish, work at fish, and be with my family. And then when I graduated, I came back home.
Wow. You were just telling us a little story about the fault stories, right? You got to visit the faults,
Oh, yes. When I was in college, there was an earthquake, and I panicked because I was in the basement doing laundry of the dorms. And I was kind of scared that there was going to be another big earthquake and the fault, the San Andreas fault, will break off and I'll die in the ocean. So my speech teacher would talk to me, and she asked, "So what's wrong? You seem really jittery lately, and you're ready to go home, like you're going to leave." And I told her how I felt, that I was afraid, and she laughed and she said, "Well, I'll take you to see the San Andreas fault." So on the weekend, we loaded into her car. We went for a nice drive. We're going through Modesto, that county, I guess is how you call it. And she pulled over on the side of the road, and she said, "Right there it is. That's the San Andreas fault." And I looked, and it's like, it's just a ditch. So, Dr. Roberta Palumbo, thank you for showing me the San Andreas fault.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Kathleen. So many adventures. And we have a great show this evening. You brought a lot of great plants and things to show us later on. Can you tell us about how you got involved with gathering and using these plants?
Well, when you're growing up in the village, it's every time you're out with your family, it's like a learning experience without like the walls of school. So, for example, when you're little kids and your parents are cutting fish, and if you're too young to cut fish, you take like a tin can, and we used to use those can openers and bent it over to make our own little ulu. And there'd be fireweed out there, or those really thick blades of grass, and we would pick the fireweed and the grass and use our little ulu to cut our own little fish out of it. And then when we're doing that, we're learning that which plants tasted good. And our parents are watching us, they know we're not doing anything wrong. So like the fireweed, that was how I learned the pith inside the fireweed when it's young because I cut it down like a fish. It tastes really good when you eat the inside of it. And then the flowers as well, they have a really delicious thing. And that's just when you're playing there, while they're cutting fish. And then also around, this is so funny, but around where the dog lot is, because everybody had dogs in my day, these short green plants would grow. And I didn't know what they were at the time. But now I know they were pineapple weeds, and some people say wild chamomile. But the little green head on it, we used to get foxtails and put that on the tip of the foxtails and make little spears, little tiny spears. And then, you're curious, I put the head of that in my mouth, and it tasted really good. Mm-hmm. And then when I'm out, I would put it in my mouth and eat it. And then later on, as an adult, I found out, oh, that's chamomile, what people make chamomile tea out of. So I was like, wow, mind blown. And then when you're going berry picking, my grandma Rita loved to berry pick. That's my mom's mom. And then even my grandma Alice liked to berry pick too. But I would go with Grandma Rita back toward the big lake. There are these big lakes behind Nulato, and everybody would walk back there to pick berries because the bushes would be higher by the lake. And when we got back there, we're all busy picking berries. And then I saw Grandma reach down into the water, and she pulled out it had a long green shoot, like a leaf coming out, but the part that was in the water, in the dirt, was white, a long white part, the root of the plant. And then she put it in her mouth and she pulled it. So the stuff that was inside stayed in her mouth. So I tried it, and lo and behold, it tasted good. So then I would do that. And of course, I'd show my brothers and sisters, look, this is what Grandma Rita ate. It tastes good. Try it. And of course, later in the summer, when you tried it again, it would be bitter. So there's like a time for it. And it was by trial and error and watching people that I learned this. And then like I said, that was with Grandma Rita when we would pick blueberries. I learned about that. And then with my Grandpa Eddie and Grandma Alice, they would load up everybody in the boat, and we would go to 18 miles below Nulato to Great-Grandma Martha Jo's fish camp. And at the fish camp, everybody would climb the bluff to go get salmon berries. It was after you were done cutting fish. And then once we got up there, everybody's hungry. Kids are always hungry. Let's eat. And then Grandma would sit down while, like, Aunt Luana, Great-Grandma would sit down while Aunt Luana and my mom and my Grandma Alice would start, like, laying out picnic stuff, food. And then before berry picking, we would eat because they didn't want us to eat the berries. And then while they were getting the food ready, Great-Grandma would crawl around on the ground pulling up roots. And she had birch bark in her bag. And then right away, she would just be whipping out these birch bark baskets. And then when we got from the bluff to where the salmon berries were, then there was a different time for those berries. And all of the berries in Alaska are very high in nutritional value. So, the Alaska Native people, we didn't have plants year-round a long time ago. So we utilized what we had. And the people used to preserve the plants and berries they would dig into the ground and put the berries and vegetables that they were gathering in baskets to the permafrost and then cover it and come back later on. But it was through these types of experiences I learned a lot about plants. And like I said, it wasn't like a sit down and I'm going to teach you this. It was just an experience, the life experience of being present. And then some things you keep practicing it and you keep doing it. Even the wild rhubarb, it, you can get it at a certain time. And if you put it in oil, it'll be preserved for a long time. You can boil it and eat it, or even bake it like regular rhubarb in pies and mix it with different types of berries. And even the berries were white fish eggs and cranberries mixed with, a little bit of sugar. Mm-hmm. And some people would go, ew, because it's like fish eggs, berries, but it's such a delicacy, and it's like nutritious food that connects you to the land, connects you to the animals and fish, and you're provided for in a very good way. So,
Is that gunzak?
gunzak, yes, yep,
Yum.
I know,
My mouth water.
I know.
I could just see you crawling around with the grandmas in the woods.
Yep. Oh God, it was so fun. And it was, like I remember mostly grandmas and aunties and mom, and my brothers and sisters. It was so funny because like the boys would leave with the men, and the men were usually the gunners, because there's big animals in the woods, and they're out there getting berries too, and you didn't want to mess around with them. But I don't remember seeing them. And the guys would have their rifles, and they're walking around and kind of scouting out, making sure we're all safe. And then the boys are, from participating and watching what the guys were doing, they were learning their traditional roles, while, as children all the way up to the teenagers that were present, we were learning our roles as well as what nature provided for us.
So beautiful. Thinking about what types of medicinal plants, you kind of talked about it briefly when you were taking out the plants and you would taste them. What types of plants are harvested at certain times of the year?
That's a good question. Thank you. A lot of it's like fish. How there's certain fish at certain times of the year that it's ready, and it's the same way with the plants. Like for example, right now we're in the beginning of May, and it's when the sap is starting to run up into the trees. The leaves are starting to wake up. And we have like the balsam poplar, we have birch, we have all the spruce, the black and white spruce trees. We have lots of willow and just even alder. And in the springtime usually is when, like for the medicinal value of willows, people would harvest the willow in the spring and in the fall. And in the springtime, you would want to get the new growth shoots of the willow and peel the bark off of it, or even just clip the twigs and make them into smaller parts and then save it by, some people make salves out of it by putting it in oils and saving it for probably about 10 weeks, I would guess, up to 10 weeks, to get all the nutrients out of the plant and into the oil. Then you could use it in that way. Other times when the leaves start to grow, when they're, I don't know, from like the knuckle on your little finger up, when they're new, they have a good taste, because later on they'll get really bitter. But you could gather it then and make a tea out of it. You could dry it for long-term preservation. Or when it's fresh, just make a tea out of it, and it has like aspirin qualities. It can relieve pain. You could make the tea and keep it like that. You could use the willow and mix it with the willow bark and mix it with the leaves. But you would gather at different times. First you would get the bark now, and then later on when the leaves are ready, you would start gathering the leaves. Oh, and then the pussy willows, of course, they're all starting to come out now. I think there's a couple out here somewhere. But yeah, there they are. These ones they're still pretty, they're new and they're young, but later on they'll get puffier and get really juicy, and they'll have a sweet taste. And then when we were kids, I think every kid in the village, when they see them at a certain point, you'd pick them off and then pop it in your mouth and just suck the juice out of it and then spit the rest of it out. So it's kind of cool how you grow up just by watching what the elders are doing, or your parents, and you learn these important, valuable things. And then my grandpa told me a story that he heard a long time ago about when the native people were living in Caillou before they came out of Caillou and created Nulato and Caltech, that the medicine people sent runners from the mountains in Caillou to create a new slough. And as runners, he told them not to turn around. You're going to get thirsty and you're going to want to stop, but you can't. You have to keep running until you get to the Yukon River. So to keep you from getting thirsty, we're going to clip a piece of willow, and you just hold it in your mouth between your teeth. And then also you think about it, when you're running, you're not going to open your mouth and be panting. So you'll have it between your teeth. You'll be able to keep the fluids inside of your body for the most part. And then for running a great distance, the medicinal value will help keep them going. So I thought that was so cool that there are these stories my grandpa heard about how plants were used with medicine people.
Wow.
So I just love that type
Beautiful.
of thing. Yeah.
You mentioned these plants have medicinal properties, and I find it very fitting that your grandmother was also a healer, a health aide for many, many, many years. And she was also the one that was berry picking with you, right?
Yes, that was Grandma Rita Ismailka. She was raised by her mom, Grandma Annie Cata, and great-grandma lived a long life. And her husband left Nulata when she was young for great-grandma Annie. So she had to take care of her kids on her own. So she knew all about the plants. She knew how to use animal parts like the sinew to make her own fish net. And then Grandma Rita told me that Grandma Annie used to walk across from Nulato to the island, which is quite a walk, when she was probably well into her 70s. And she would carry the homemade fish net with her in the springtime. And she would lie down and spread the net out. And when birds came close by, because she spread different things on the ground to draw the birds there, she would jump up and fling the net over these birds so she could have meat to feed her kids.
Wow.
So I thought that was so cool that all of these stories she shared about her mom and how the things she did to survive. Without a hunter, and you have to take care of your kids as a woman, you're kind of limited. And so she had to know about the plants. And that was how Grandma Annie taught Grandma Rita how to eat those willow, or the roots from in the lake. And even, like I said earlier, the wild rhubarb, and even in the springtime too, for medicinal value for women troubles, women issues like today they have Midol. Well, back in the olden days, they didn't have Midol. The women used high bush cranberry bark. They would peel the bark off of the cranberry plant, and the high bushes can be really high. And they would take the leaves when they're coming out fresh, and then the berries after they'd fully ripen. So you'd gather these different medicines at different times and then combine them. And you would make a drink out of this high bush cranberry concoction with the bark, the leaves, and the berry. And for your women issues, it would help. If you were cramping during your cycle, it's something to help. After you gave birth, to help everything go back down, this was something that would help as well. And then an interesting thing too, for when you're coming out of winter time. A long time ago, everybody used to get lice. And when we were little kids, everybody had lice. Yeah.
The native term for it, right?
Native term, yeah. So when you had head lice, we used to call it duck grass. It's that spindly grass with little points sticking out, and they're growing like on sandbars along riverbanks. You would take that and boil it in water, heat it up and boil it, and it'll make the water green. And you'd wash your hair and you use that. Get rid of your clean yourself up.
Before you go back to the village.
Right, yeah, right, before you go home. Before all the ice is gone and you could go home. Too funny. But I see that plant around, and I always think about that. And then even people a long time ago, I asked, well, could you drink it after you make that tea? Could you drink it instead of just bathing with it? And you could drink it as a way to, if you had bloating or if your body was retaining water, we called it duck grass. I don't know for sure what it is, but that's one of the medicines that the people use to release all their bloating. That's pretty cool.
Wow, that is really cool.
Yeah.
And in talking about your grandmother, the strong resiliency, you were just talking about our people have such strong resiliency, and that's what carries you through. So beautiful.
Yes.
I love it. You kind of touched on the medicinal uses and the specific uses, and so I think we'll go past that one. How and where do you harvest these medicinal plants, and how do you respectfully harvest these plants? Is there a way? Is there a
Thank
process?
you. That's a good question. Well, traditional values, the Native people, we have a contract, like an unwritten contract with our environment, because it takes care of us, it provides for us. And it's the same with animals. There's this huge respect for the animals because they give themselves to us. You go out hunting, and if you're a respectful hunter, you will be rewarded. If you are a gatherer and you are a respectful gatherer, you will be rewarded. And, in the back of our minds, we might not, say a prayer right in the moment, but in the back of our minds, we're always expressing our gratitude. Say, for example, when we go berry picking and we have our meal before we go out and to start gathering the berries, we eat dry fish, and we'll take the skin of the dry fish and kind of lift the moss and stick it under the moss and thank you. A little bit of fertilizer for you right there to the earth. And then it's a contract, like there, I put the fish inside of me. I'm giving the fish a part of you to the land. Thank you for providing for us. I'm humbled in your presence. These things go through you, and literally it's in my body. I'm a part of it. That fish I ate, it becomes a part of me. It's giving me nutrition. It's giving me energy to go forward. The plants that we gather, it's doing the same thing. We're connected in ways that are so, it's hard to even explain until you're out there. And it's like it could be your church when you're out there berry picking or gathering and even hunting. We have different experiences because of the meditation. Your breathing slows down. You can feel the wind, you could see the wind, you could smell everything around you, and you're just totally connected. So when you do these things in a good way, you have this gratitude in your heart, you're pure of heart going out there, and then you find what you need. Sometimes, if you go out in a bad mood to go berry picking, you might not see anything because your mood is blocking your vision. But this contract is important, and for lack of a better word, I keep saying contract, but it's the connection. And when you're, a long time ago, our people figured out these things. We know which berries to gather, which are good for us and which won't harm us. Like even people mistake those orange, we call them crowberries, but they're not crowberries. Orange berries, when you go out cranberry picking, they think that's good for you, but those are not good for you. So we don't pick it. We pick the cranberries, and we know what to find. And then there's bog cranberries and true cranberries. And I started just going off in my own mind with my story, so I completely lost the question. But the medicine in the plants, it goes way back. And it's like the first people who were walking on these lands, they figured it all out for us. And today we're kind of going forward with it, as my mom took us all out with her. Like I said, it was intergenerational, great-grandma, grandma, mom, and us. And then today I go out and I take my kids and I take my grandkids, and hoping, I find that I do a lot of talking to explain stuff because I feel like today's kids don't pay attention the way like kids in my generation did, if that even makes sense, that it's different.
So that contract within you is sort of written in your DNA and is passed through generation to generation?
It is. And it's something you have to take care of it. You have to make sure that knowledge gets passed on. And you can write it down, you could record it, but you look at how kids are today, it's like, oh, there it is, flip the screen, there it is. That's not how it's gonna be passed on. You have to take them out there and explain the feeling. I mean, I know my grandkids think I'm crazy when I go berry picking because I'll take them up off of Murphy Dome and I'll make them lay on the ground on their backs and look up at the sky. It's like, why are we doing this, Grandma? Just be quiet and listen. Yeah. Are we done listening, Grandma? No, listen. Open your eyes. And then pretty soon, because it's a windy space, then the ravens will be out there just gliding. And then they go, whoa. And then they calm down and they're breathing. It's like their breathing changes and they're following the ravens. And what my granddaughter once, I think she was probably 5, she said, Grandma, the earth is warm. It's like, yes, she's welcoming you. She's happy you're here. So even this past fall, I took the 2 older kids with me, and they're older, and they didn't complain. They knew exactly what was going to happen. We stopped at like Olness Pond and had a picnic first. They threw rocks and stuff in the lake. And then we got to the top of the hill where we were going to berry pick, and right away they just laid down. They just laid on the ground, and it's like, they got it.
It's like their grounding ceremony.
Yes.
And then they're present afterwards.
Yep. And
Beautiful.
It's not in a hurry to get home. They know what they have to do. And I don't force them to fill up their bucket. I mean, I tell them, well, when my bucket is filled up, we can go. Oh,
beautiful. So. I was thinking about when I went berry picking with my late cousin Laverne Schaefer, and it was raining. It was just her and I. It was raining, but we still had a good time. We found berries. Mm-hmm. We didn't let the rain bother us. It was just it was like we're present. It was just a good time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the berries still taste good in the rain, in the sun.
Yes. So refreshing. Beautiful. How do you prepare the plants? I see you have a lot of display areas here. Uh-huh. Do you make them into salves or teas? I've seen these growing up. Tell us a little bit more about how you prepare these.
Yeah, everybody in Alaska, in the village, people know this one, the Hudson Bay tea or Labrador tea or wild tea. A long time ago, this was the only tea the native people used to have, because you could find it anywhere in the summer and even in the winter if you dig. And I just gathered it, a couple hours ago. So it still has the smell too, if you wanted to smell it. Rub it in your fingers and smell it. But that you would just heat up water, and you could add it to your regular tea to stretch it, or you could use it to make tea. And usually when we go out with families, right away, make the campfire and make the Labrador tea. Mm-hmm. So it's one of the ways we would use that. And then if you drink too much of it, again, it kind of like cleanses your body, so you don't want to drink too much of it. So it'll make you pee a lot. So got to be careful of that.
So it's a natural diuretic?
Yep, a natural one, diuretic, yeah.
Diuretic?
Yeah. So that's one way people use that, and everybody knows it. And the cottonwood, people make salves out of the cottonwood, and that's what I have here, and it's back here. But you get the buds when the resin inside of the buds start to come out. And it's too early for these buds because they're really dry yet. But you could squeeze it yourself, but you could help it along by adding water to the jar, and then it'll start to release the resin, drinking up the water. And when it gets to that point where you see the resin coming out, that's the medicinal property. You'll take the buds and you'll put them in like a jar, and you could add, a long time ago they used to add it to fat, but nowadays we have all of these different things. We have extra virgin olive oil. Of course, I use all organic materials. And also one of my favorite is almond oil for making salves. And then another one, jojoba oil. A lot of people like this because it's really good on your skin. But
And what do they do? What do those olive oil and jojoba, what do they do?
It takes all of the properties, it'll leach the properties that you want from the plant into the oil. And you would let it sit. I did make a salve. You're going to have to open it because with balsam poplar last year, I drove through Denali Park and I went down by the river with the fresh mountain water. And then I took the buds and I put it in the olive oil or the almond oil and I left it in for 10 weeks. And then I strained it really good using a coffee filter and cheesecloth and squeezed it all out. And then I got organic beeswax and I just mixed it to make the salve in there. And it works really well on aching muscles, arthritic fingers, because I do a lot of beadwork. So I have arthritis and I have carpal tunnel. So this is kind of like my homemade medicine for all of that instead of putting other harsher things on my body or into my body. So I really like that. And then I even use it on my lips and all. So, and
It has healing properties.
it does. And you could research all of this information is online now. You could get everything off of the web. And so I really like that one, the cottonwood buds or balsam poplar, oil of Gilead or Gilead's oil, some people call it. So I like that one. And then for the birch, or not the birch, for the birch, I'm jump ahead. For the birch, people take the fungus, chaga. A lot of people have become aware of chaga lately. And when you take the chaga, you have to be very careful in harvesting, how you harvest it. You want to leave kind of a little bit of the fungus on the tree. Otherwise, you'll kill the tree, and you don't want to kill it right away. Whereas getting the buds off of the trees, I don't strip one tree fully of all of the buds. I just kind of walk through, and I'll go from here to there. And usually after a big wind, I'll look on the ground for branches that fell from the top down and try and pick up the ones that are on the ground. If the buds are ready to harvest, or put them in water until forcing them along.
Oh, so
Yeah.
even this is kind of a hot item people most recently have been talking about, but this is something that our people have always been familiar with.
The native people, the indigenous people have known about chaga, known about all of these plants since they were here. And, now people are selling chaga, they're turning it into a cottage industry, and they're not being very mindful of the harvesting. And around urban centers, you'll see that a lot of the birch trees have been kind of stripped of all of the fungus, because when the tree has a wound, it heals itself by creating this fungus. And when you take it off, you're basically just it's like a scab the tree put there. If you take the whole thing away, you're going to, kill it. Mm-hmm. So you need to be very careful. And I kind of have a feeling it'll end up being regulated eventually, because too many trees can get wiped out. Mm-hmm. And then people think that there's always plenty. When people first came to Alaska and they saw all the moose, they thought, oh, that's going to be plenty, to last forever. And today it's a struggle. It's the same with salmon. When people first came to Alaska, they thought, oh, it'll be there forever, and they over-harvest it. And now it's a struggle to get that. So it's the same with our plants. We have to be very mindful and think about how we harvest and do it in a respectful way. And it's off of the birch tree, the chaga. Mm. And right now, too, people are tapping birch trees, getting the birch water. And it's just birch water. You can drink it. It has its own nutritional value. It's very healing as well. People who have allergies, some start drinking that a little bit so that their allergies don't flare up so bad. So it's really, it's important. And even the indigenous people in Russia, our neighbors in the circumpolar north, they have similar plants where they're at. Same in Canada. They go out and they gather medicine, and all of the respect and the contract with the land and nature, it's all deeply ingrained in the indigenous people, that it's all done in a good way. being mindful of the future, being mindful of the plants so that it'll grow back and we don't totally strip it. So I think that's important to note. And then this is from a white spruce tree branch. They're not ready, and we can't zoom up close, but at the tip of the branches, when you go out in the woods, you can look at it because it'll be hard to see here. But at the tip of the branches is where the new growth will come. And it's also when the spruce pollen gets really bad because it'll grow probably to a half an inch long, and then the bud will pop off and the new growth will be a lighter green there. And people will pick that off and you could eat it there and it tastes really good. Or you could gather a bunch of it and you could vacuum seal it and save it in your freezer. Some people even make jelly out of it. You could make a salve out of it. And it's really good for like breathing issues, like when you have colds, it's good for that. If you make the salve, you could rub it on your chest, on your back, and on the bottom of your feet. And it'll help with for breathing issues and with colds. And a long time ago, when all of the village people had wood stoves in their houses, almost you go in every house, there would be spruce boughs on the stove. And just even the scent, you know how today people use those aromatherapy or those diffusers. These were our natural diffusers back in the day to cleanse the air and take care of us. And it's like how the outside Indians in the lower 48, they sage and they bless with sage. This was what our people used to use. And when I was up in Arctic Village, there was a storm that just kind of suddenly came, and there was a giant white spruce tree. And I was with Trimble Gilbert and Cora McGuire and some other teachers. We were Kenneth Frank. We were out going to look at the caribou fences, and we got under the big white spruce tree. And we were all standing there. We were laughing because the sun was shining, and here it was raining on us. And then when the rain stopped, Trimble took his walking stick and he tapped the tree, his toe. He tapped the tree. He said, "Thank you, Grandpa, for taking care of us." And it was just so, no matter where you're at in Alaska, that you're going to learn something from somebody else. And so then while we were under the tree, Cora started talking about the medicinal value of the spruce tree. And she's from Alacaquet, Cora? Yeah. And she was a wealth of information. And she always used to tell me, you could always take care of yourself by the land. It'll cleanse your soul. And that's true.
Beautiful. So that was their Bengay.
Yes.
Yeah?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's the Bengay, natural indigenous Bengay.
Wow.
But then pretty soon you'll see the caps starting to pop off, and the yellow pollen, you'll see it when it rains in the puddles. And one of my students from UAF is from, she's Haida, and she's from the southeast, and she goes home to be with her dad and to fish and do different activities. And I've shared a lot of what I have done here in the interior with her. And when she went home, she gathered different plants from her area, and she brought me back this in an oil. She said, "Put it on your dry skin. The interior is so bad." And it works really good, and it's just a cedar oil.
Wow. I bet it smells really good too.
Yeah, it smells like oil. Yeah.
I'm not going to lie.
I'm not gonna lie, it smells like oil. Yeah. But when it first started, it smelled different. But even from different places around Alaska, because I've traveled so much in different careers, and the students, they come from all over Alaska coming to UAF, and we talk about our plants and we share food and different things. And it's amazing to learn, like the Devil's Club is such an important plant in the southeast area, and it has lots of high medicinal value, and there's a great deal of respect for it. And even the stalks of the Devil's Club, when they gather the leaves, they don't just waste it. They'll turn it into beads and different things. So it's just so rewarding and enriching to be able to share stuff. And it just comes about in conversation, And when some people come to my house and they're not familiar with me and my personality, and they're like, whoa, you're like you're a witch woman or something. It's like I'll have feathers, I'll have shells, I'll have dirt in a jar, I'll have plants. It's like, yeah, you could say whatever, but yeah.
All your lamps around.
Yeah, all my little salt rock lamps. But it's kind of...
It's your healing space.
It is. And even, to go out on the land to gather this, I'm not walking on concrete. I'm out there walking on moss, pulling my knees up to step over roots and branches, and I'm breathing this clean air these plants help to clean. And when I step my foot down, if I have negative energy in my body, I release it into the earth. And with my next step up, the earth is helping to cleanse my soul and my spirit and make me stronger in who I am. And that renewal, it comes from the land, being on the land. And I feel so bad for people who have to live in concrete, places. When I was away to college, I used to climb the hills away from the school just not to feel concrete under my feet. And it was... It kind of, you can become a broken person and not even realize it when you don't make these connections back to your homeland. I mean, it's like, even when you go home to the villages after being in the urban centers for so long, you're walking on your home ground where your ancestors' feet have been before you. You make those reconnections. You get rejuvenated. When you see your people, they hug you, and they hug you hard. They say, oh, it's good to see you when you came. You're hugging them and you could smell them, and it's just rewarding. Whereas, when you're trapped in city ways, it's hard to find those kinds of connections. And then there's so many people, and they see you, but they don't see you. You're almost like invisible, even though you're present. And that's one of the hardest things I think about living in the city. And when my students come to the university from all over, I just want them to feel those connections, to create these communities, to share what we have, And it's funny because, in some classes I'll say, well, I'm going to bring in dried salmon in my next class. So I'll bring in a little bit, cut it up tiny, and say, if you don't want to try it, you don't have to try it. You could take a little tiny piece, and then, I'll bring in blueberries next. And you don't have to try it if you don't want to. There's yogurt or Cool Whip if you want to put it on there. And, it's like pretty soon, some kids will come up and say, hey, I know how to make baklava. Can I make baklava for the next class? I'm like, baklava, sure. Bring your food and share with us. So by the end of the semester, when we're on campus, pre-COVID, we would have like this little smorgasbord going on in class. I miss that. And I think community is important. And then that's where also you find out about practices.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. You were talking about the trees and their healing properties. I think we're going to continue hearing new studies on trees and such. There's an article where it says that if you walk in the forest, you come out refreshed because the forest, they call it forest shower, tree showers or something.
Yes.
It's sending you healing properties or something. And our people knew that, huh?
They did. And even walking barefoot now, they're saying, oh, take your shoes off when you're walking in the woods, go barefoot. Our people knew that for centuries. That's how come we always wore, moose, mucklucks, moose moccasins, caribou, sealskin. We knew that through these organic materials. We're still connected. Yeah.
Beautiful. Goosebumps. Is there a certain length of time after harvest that the plants, they maintain their potency?
You don't want to, up to a year, like this one would be up to a year, and then you'll reharvest, return it to the earth if you didn't use it all up, and then wash your jar and use your jar again, gathering other plants. Once you make it into safs, or it can go a year to 2 years, depending on the type of oil you use, if you don't use it up right away. The teas, if you dry them, you can use it for a lot longer. And I mean, heck, they're dehydrated corns and potatoes in the Andes Mountains that the Incas, ancient Incas, have done like over 1,000 years ago, and then they just put it in water and they can come back. They were like, the indigenous people were phenomenal at food storage because you never knew when there would be a shortage.
Wow.
Yeah. And if some people make like the chaga, you can add alcohol to it, like vodka or Everclear alcohol, to make that tincture out of it. And you could make a tincture out of any of these things too. And you let it sit and absorb the different, take out all of the medicinal parts of the plant into the tincture and then put it in dropper bottles. And that could last, those could last up to 10 years. And you could add it to teas, or, you know, it'll be super concentrated in a little tiny bottle, but that could last up to 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So how long does the chaga last after you ground it and have it in its own little bags or whatever?
Because it's dry, it could last a long time.
Oh, cool.
But then I use it up pretty fast. So you know, and I only take what I need. I don't try to fill up my shed with chaga. So it's like, why? What would be the point? Then I'll have no room for my hides. You know?
You don't have a chaga storage at your
I
house?
don't have a chaga storage. Oh, and right now too, with the willow, as the willow is getting ready, now is the time to gather the willow and the alder bark if you wanted to use it for tanning hides, because of the tannins in those plants. You would make a tea out of it, a strong tea. Peel the bark off. You could use, if you can split them lengthwise and scrape out the pith inside of it, if you're going to use it for tanning. You could tan animal hides. You can tan fish skin. So I've been experimenting with tanning salmon skin right now.
So cool.
And I have used alder, and I'm going to gather now willow, but I'm looking for a specific green willow because I think that green color will look really cool with tanning the fish skin. So there's so many, plants have so many uses beyond the medicinal value. There's so much. I mean, a long time ago, the native people before caskets and all of that, when people died, they used to take the bark of spruce trees and wrap the deceased in spruce bark and then put them away in that way. So, you know, going back to nature. And then when you're walking in the woods, sometimes you'll see those tall, big spruce trees lying on the ground, and the rotted inside of it will have a red color. And then that's the stuff that you would pick up and you would carry back home, because that's what you use when you're tanning moose hides to finish off the tanning process. So it's done. If it gets wet, it won't, you know, get all buggered up again. So, I'm sorry.
I love how excited you are. I could tell you're really passionate about these things. And I was listening to you talk, and you were telling us about your great grandma, and she was a healer, and then your mother is a teacher, and now you're a teacher. It's like generations and generations of teachers and now you're teaching your children.
No kidding. My grandkids.
Your grandkids,
Yeah.
who will be probably future teachers too.
I hope so. Yeah, my kids aren't teachers. I had only 2 though. I should have had more so I could go for a teacher. No. I could
Love
adopt.
it.
But you know, when you're a teacher, all of those kids in your classroom become your kids. They're yours. So I do have teachers out there.
I heard another teacher say that young people, because you were a middle school, high school teacher, right, at one
Yes.
time, and so those young people still go up to you and say, "Hi, Mrs. Meckel. Hi,
They
Mrs.
do.
Hildebrand."
Yes, they do. And it's so funny because, you know, I see the students from my very first class. I see him in 4th grade. And I see him with these children who are adults now. And I feel so good because, you know, I feel like he's my son. He's not my son, but I feel like he is, because I follow him and I see him growing up. And then like when the Haida girl, Sarah, she's back home now in her home community, and she just announced, she's expecting a baby this fall, and my heart just swelled up because it's like, there's my girl and she's going to have a baby. So it's
so beautiful.
Yeah, you get connected.
So there was a time I was at your house, and there was all these girls at your house. They were doing different things like processing stuff, sewing. It's like your home became a sanctuary for these students who are at the University of Alaska, just because you mentioned earlier that that's your healing space. And so they must have felt like that was their healing space too. You just drew them to your home.
Well, it was so funny because in one of the classes, Aesthetic Appreciation of Alaska Native Performing Arts, we share food, we talk about performances, we talk about regalia, music, singing, dancing, and I have such passion and sharing everything. I'll try and wear a different Kasbak shirt every class. So, they're like, well, who made that? Like some of them I make. My cousin Carla made this one. And I said, they're like, well, what if we wanted to learn how? Where would we go? Is there a place? I'm like, well, sure, you can come on over. And then at that time, one girl, she had her flip switch for her freezer got messed up, and she didn't know it went off. So all of her food defrosted. So she's like, I need to can all of this stuff. I have nothing. Can I come to your house and can it? I'm like, sure, come on over. You can do it. And, it's an extension. I want it to be an extension of their community, that they can keep doing it. Because growing up in the village, that's kind of how we were raised, The teachers always had Mrs. Simpson, she always had an open door for us. She taught us all, kids in the 4th grade, how to knit. She started teaching us how to cook when we got older. And it was so important to have these types of connections. And the people who are influencing you in your life when you're doing something in a good way, in a supportive way, you're giving back and you're going beyond. And we don't know what anybody else is going through. You could be sitting here in front of me and look perfectly fine, and then you just might need a hand reach out and, somebody to say, come on over, and that opens it up. And then it's so funny because originally they came like in pairs, then pretty soon it was like, oh, there's 2, and then one day there's 6. It's like, wow. And I would tell people, oh my goodness, I have all these kids over at the house and they want to sew, they want to learn how to make Kasbaks, and I have only 2 sewing machines, and today I have 7 sewing machines in my house. That when people hear that, they're like, oh, I'll help, here's a sewing machine. Or, they'll give fabric, and, like we started a beading club, and so all of these girls would, they don't have the supplies because they're coming to college for book learning and, to get ahead in the Western sense, but yet they miss that community feeling of what they did back home. So people want to keep that alive and keep supporting them away from home. And even if it's not within your culture, we don't want you to feel left out. We're welcoming people. We want you to be a part of our group and to feel supported. So that's very important.
I love it, because there wasn't not only just Alaska Native or Native students there was people of all walks of life there at your house. It was like an open door policy for you.
Yes. And one of the girls, she's like, she had a Southern accent. I just don't get the Native stuff. I'm going to get it, though, but I can sure teach y'all how to line dance. She's so sweet, Riley. So she taught us how to line dance.
Beautiful. That was her contribution.
It was her contribution. Yeah. So fun.
I love it. What can people do, and what is the best way to begin learning about using these medicinal plants that you shared?
Like I said earlier, there's you can find everything online. And when you're going out to gather, drive far away from Fairbanks. Don't be too close, because there's so many contaminants and pollutants in the area. Remember from when there used to be leaded gas, all of that lead would get into the snow and people would push it on the sides of the road in snow berms, and that would just go into the ground. So you want to go far away as possible, and once you're out to a space where you want to gather, you're going to want to walk at least 500 yards off of the road, like just walk out into the woods. And if you're not familiar with navigation, make sure you carry a compass or you let somebody know or have your GPS. And be respectful. Take a moment to breathe in these spaces. Just feel the vibe, feel the connection to it, and just breathe it in, smell things. I always grab stuff and rub it in my fingers and smell it and think about, what am I doing here? And make yourself present in the moment. So all of these things are important. You'll feel connected. And then start gathering. And pretty much, when I first started making my own teas a long time ago, it was trial and error. I had all of these, for example, rose hips that I picked, and I didn't put a net over or screened it, and I just laid all of these berries out on the racks. And some family came over for dinner, and my aunt was looking at it. She was just intrigued that, oh, you're making teas. Wow. And she said, oh my God, Kathy, these berries are moving. I went over and I looked, and gosh darn it, they had little tiny worms inside of them. They were moving. I said, well, yeah, that's protein. Protein mixed in with your vitamin C. We'll grind it. No, I didn't. I just laughed. I just threw it all away. And then when I was having tea at my auntie's house, and I was laughing about it with my uncle, and he said, well, you don't need to do that with rose hips. You just wait until the fall. They're going to dry out. That's when you pick it. And you don't even need I was doing a crank grinder. He said, you don't need to use a crank grinder. Just throw it in your little coffee grinder. It's like, wow. Perfect. It worked.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Native ingenuity.
Yeah, my uncle.
How does the medicinal plants connect Alaska Natives to our culture?
I might sound redundant. How does it connect us to our culture? When you're taking time in the space that you're gathering, you're being very present in the moment. And you even said it earlier too. It's like through these teachings, when you're sharing it and when you're learning it, it is like in your DNA almost. And it's like, my grandma telling me stories about her mom and how she gathered plants, and that for how many years, here I am 60, from when I was a little kid, we used to go all the way down to halfway to great grandma's fish camp to pick salmon berries. How many years people are still going there, A long time ago, when I was a kid, we used to go across the island to pick raspberries. The whole town used to go across in boats and then pick raspberries and then have a little picnic on the sandbar. And then for how many years we still yet go to 2 Mile to pick blueberries. And even a long time ago, Aunt Luana, we used to go to her fish camp down there, and we used to go way back into the woods and pick berries back in that area too, blueberries. Mm-hmm. And it's been like, we do these things over and over. And even the gathering and the use of plants. I mean, how many centuries have we been using that tundra tea, Hudson Bay tea, stinkweed even, how long those were the medicines prior to this. So it is cultural preservation, this knowledge we still have. And today we can find even more, our knowledge is on the internet. The way we have used these things for years, and it's cultural appropriation, yeah. Mm-hmm. But, when people first came here, these outsiders, the colonizers, the settlers, they didn't know about any of these things. Mm-hmm. They didn't know about chaga. Mm-hmm. It was the first people. Every single plant that's out here, the native people knew how to use these plants so that ancestral knowledge with every generation. They pass it on. And then we, as times get modern and there's this technology, we incorporate new things. I'm not rendering moose fat or caribou fat or using fish juice. I'm using, organic almond oil. It's like, we don't even have almonds in Alaska, and olive oil. And we don't even have olives in Alaska. So we kind of incorporate things with each new generation.
Beautiful. And what's your advice for the next generation to get involved with these medicinal plants and such? What's your words for them for carrying on these traditions?
Well, for the next generation, if find people who do these types of things. There's a whole network out there of people who gather plants and who know how to make medicinal plants. From Unlacleet, Adrienne Blanchford. She knows so much about plants. She is a wealth of knowledge. Sarah Peel in Southeast Alaska, she knows about medicinal plants, and she's a young woman who came here and she's just absorbing as much as she can. There are so many people, Katie Tozier over in Nome, she knows about the plants in that area. She can gather stinkweed and she can make stuff too. And all of our berries, so many people know about the berries already across the state, and we have different ways of how we use it, like here, mixing it with whitefish eggs to make gunzak. Maybe in other cultural areas they're doing something. Find out, go out and ask questions. Take your grandma or your great-grandma or your aunties or your grandpas and uncles out in the woods and then ask them, gee, long time ago, how did you guys use these plants for medicine? And then it's all organic, it's healing, it connects your spirit, your soul to the place, to your ancestors, to your family, to new connections. I really want to encourage you to try and even experiment, see what you like and what you don't like. And I'm like only one person, and I kind of go crazy doing stuff with all of this, but I'm curious. I love to see how are things done. And I'm so curious. I went to Peru and went to Machu Picchu to find out from the Quechua people, what did you guys use for medicine? And to find out that the whole of Machu Picchu was a medicine people's place, that all of the terraces, they brought dirt from the valleys up into the mountains so that they could grow medicine. And that was a place of learning. So, and that's in South America. What's going on in other places? What are other people doing? I know the Mongolian people are very tied to the land and the animals and plants. I know we have connections all over. Like even in Norway, they eat salmon berries just like we eat salmon berries. I wonder if they make fish ice cream with it too, like we do. Who knows? So.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Kathleen.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you for sharing all your experiences, and thank you all for tuning in this evening. Thank you to Doi Unlimited that we can put together these programs that are put on by the Morris Thompson Cultural and Visitor Center, Denakanaga and Tanana Chiefs Conference. I'm Sharon Hildebrand. Masi.